And this weekend, the United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the Defence Secretary Robert Gates are in Melbourne for the annual Australia-US ministerial talks. Our studio guest this morning is the Defence Minister, Stephen Smith. But first we'll see what the Sunday papers are covering around the country, and certainly in Melbourne that are hosting those talks. That's a key story, though the story is really more about Hillary Clinton, I think, being in Melbourne than the substance, but there is some substance. Apparently we'll be seeing some more of the American military in this country. Here's the Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd.
We in Australia, as I've said many times before, welcome the US making greater use of our ports, of our facilities, of our training facilities, of our test firing ranges. That's what alliances are all about. And that's been the case for decades past. It'll be the case for decades in the future.
Brian Toohey, what do you make of all that?
Well, it's true that it's been the case for decades in the past, and will be, of course, we're just extending that. I think the more important thing is Stephen Smith intends raising in a very general way with the Defence Secretary, Bob Gates, what's happening to the plane we've already seemed to be committed to buying, called the Joint Strike Fighter, or F-35. Gates has got another big study underway after its costs have gone up one more time, its delivery time has gone out, and its performance looks to be faltering. Yet, unfortunately, John Faulkner, when he was Defence Minister, committed us to buying 14 of the very early model of that plane where the costs are highest and where none of the bugs have been ironed out. We're due to buy up to 100, and we really need to rethink whether that's a good idea. We've got plenty of alternatives.
Can we review it?
Oh, yes, of course we could. And as long as we buy some more American planes, I don't care which ones we buy, I don't think. Although they'd like this program to work. The Super Hornets we've got, we could get a few more of those. We could start switching across to pilotless planes and so forth. We've got options, and there's no great pressure because we've already got 71 existing Hornet planes still flying.
All right, we'll see what Stephen Smith has to say about that a little later on. And Hillary Clinton yesterday made it clear in a news conference with the Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd, that he is an important conduit between the United States and China. Here she is.
I'm looking forward to discussing at length over the next 2+ days with the Foreign Minister his assessment of China's current thinking. He just returned from yet another visit to China. I want to thank him publicly here in Australia for doing a lot of the most important thinking about how the Asia-Pacific region needs to be organized. He has been extremely helpful to the United States in our efforts to build a positive, cooperative, and comprehensive relationship with China as it rises on the global stage.
So, Gerard Henderson, Kevin Rudd is important to them in terms of keeping them up to speed on China, and also in terms of his vision of the architecture of the region.
Well, there's reason to be critical of the Rudd government's handling of Japan and India, but it got it pretty right on China. Kevin Rudd spoke up on human rights issues when he was in Beijing. The White Paper was criticised, particularly in sections of the media. I think it pretty well got the balance right. It was concerned about China's future military development, but it wanted to keep Australian contacts close with China, and Kevin Rudd has pursued that as Foreign Minister, having come off that as Prime Minister. I think it's a useful conduit, but partly because the Labor government didn't just lie down in front of China, and it was criticised for being too tough on China, but I think it got the balance pretty right.
And how would they look at it from the other end, though, Brian Toohey, from the Chinese end?
I think they're mostly happy with Australia. They would prefer that we didn't announce in white papers, name them as a potential enemy, and also they wouldn't much like us talking about getting giant new submarines that can fire missiles directly into China and so forth. But I'm sure that that's outweighed by their pleasure at being able to buy Australian iron ore and so forth.
Malcolm Farr?
Look, I think that Hillary should be put into perspective. Whilst it's very good that these talks proceed, it's another expression of a very close and cemented relationship, and we look forward just to break the boredom for one of these meetings where they decide to weaken defence ties with Australia. But the real action is happening with Barack Obama, who is all but flying over Australia to get to other places, spending 10 days in our region. He's going to Indonesia, India. He's going to the G20 in Korea, where he's going to have his 7th bilateral with Hu Jintao. He's going to Japan to make his 3rd visit to Japan for the APEC summit, and he still can't get to Australia. You can understand that. The United States priorities is to gee up a bit of trade with these booming economies such as India, such as China, and Australia just doesn't fit that offensive. But let's make it plain. Mrs Clinton's visit here is to the Australian public more the visit of a celebrity. It really will not greatly advance, nor will it be a deterrent to our ties to the
But
United
these
States.
venues are driven by the nature of the visits, aren't they? Hillary Clinton is here because there's an OSMIN meeting going on, and Barack Obama is going to South Korea and Japan because there are international meetings
he's also going to
on.
Indonesia and India.
Yeah, but the
though.
President's itinerary is very busy. We are a long way away, and there are no great problems with Australia. But this decision that Hillary Clinton's announced, or is going to announce today, of greater military involvement of the US in Australia is good for the alliance, but it's also good for the local economies to the north of Australia, where we have military facilities. This is an important announcement. The truth is President Obama doesn't need to come here. If he wants to come here, and he can come here, well and good. But there aren't any great problems. And if you look at the US media at the moment, he's been hugely criticised for taking the trip that he's taken. Imagine if he came to Australia and spent a day on Sydney Harbour with his family, which was what was initially proposed, that this criticism would escalate.
And he would get away with the Indonesian leg of the trip because there's a sentimental angle to that, having spent some of his childhood
Yeah,
there.
but the important thing is it's the world's biggest Muslim country.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, and Hillary Clinton has just returned from, has just been to New Zealand, of course, and on both sides of the Tasman they're confusing the titles. Have a look at this.
So again, Prime Minister Rudd, thank you for your partnership and friendship, and I look forward to a very productive visit.
So, you know, President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, please. Can I thank you?
So in one case it was a previous title, maybe it
Well,
might
I
be a
think
future title.
in fairness to Hillary Clinton, as you know, it's the American tradition to give former leaders their original titles. So the original Clinton is called President Clinton. It's not uncommon for her to call Kevin Rudd Prime Minister. I think that's probably what she was doing. That's the American tradition.
No big deal.
Okay, we'll accept that. That's the Sunday papers. And now, while I guess the Defence Minister Stephen Smith joins us, let's hear from Julie and Julia. Julie Bishop and Julia Gillard have had this to say this morning about strengthening military ties between Australia and the United States.